and maybe even late at night, and they come along, and the patient has got C. diff or acute myocardial infarction or stroke or whatever the diagnosis is. And in the notes is this piece of paper stuck in right at the front of the notes, and they have to sign off as having done the 6 key things. However tired they are, however late at night it is, however little they know about the subject, those have to be signed off. And what happened with Northwick Park, the reason why they did this incidentally was because they had a couple of adverse events which lowered the morale in the hospital. They said, actually it was the chief nursing officer said, I'm going to learn about what they do in the States. I'm going to come back and develop care bundles. And they put these in the notes. She's a very practical woman. She actually, Liz Rock, I put her name as the #1 on the paper because she was the person who led that, or wrote the paper herself. And you know that the right things have been done for that diagnosis. It forces people to do. And what they achieved was from having slightly lower than average death rate, they got to the lowest HSMR in the country within 1 year. And we did it a bit with my own hospital the next year in Pure College, and they got the lowest HSMR in England last year. So it is possible to make changes. And although people have tended to say they think the care bundles are a good idea, I've actually had requests for them throughout the world. And the paper, you could say to people, the paper's in the British Medical Journal, I think it's the 3rd of April, but it's there. But it's one of the papers which is free. You don't have to pay for it, because some papers which are important, they put there free. And the second thing is, if you go to the web version of the paper, you can get all the care bundles also free. So any hospital could actually use these and develop more care bundles if they wanted to. If there are certain diagnoses, they could develop their own care bundles. Now what I want to do now is to see if any of you have got any queries, because it is a complicated science. See someone
yes,
there, 2, 3, right, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Professor Jarman. One thing that we noticed, the mainstream care bundles seems to be going around. One thing we noticed, certainly when I've represented a few of the NHS urgent care reviews that Ian Sturgis and a few others did from Central, is that the hospital out of hours is certainly different than the hospital in hours. Do you actually get that kind of information? And also, for instance, new intake times, February, August can be rather perilous. I mean, I know Phil Hammond and Maria Shorty's from the Bristol inquiry, and Phil used to say it was called the killing fields, those kind of areas. Do you actually get information that's that precise?
I can see you haven't been reading your British Medical Journal.
Oh, no,
I don't know how you missed it. No, we published 2 papers on both of these things.
Right.
There's one in the BMJ which shows that on that handover period in August,
yes,
there is a higher mortality.
Right.
That's one thing. And it was particularly high, I think, in 2008 when they had the problem with MTAS, Medical Application Training Service, where the doctors couldn't get their jobs. That was a big cock-up,
yes,
to be honest. And that is there. And then the other thing is that another thing we published was to show that you get higher death rates at weekends.
Right.
So don't
Bank holidays?
we didn't actually look on us because they're not consistent the same day every year. So you have to have something, you know, to compare one with one. Weekends was enough. You definitely get higher. But there weren't any particular hospitals the weekend thing that stood out particularly badly. So the overall figures showed higher at the weekend, but it didn't. Or Miguel was second.
How can we combat creative coding?
Sorry?
Creative coding.
Creative coding.
How can
yes.
we combat against that?
Well, creative coding, yes. There are various things. Since people have started to take notice of the HSMRs, and I think, to be honest, they are now sort of almost legal, you know. Don't have to hide when I go to the Department of Health. It's because the Department of Health themselves published them as from last year, because they've set up this committee to look at HSMRs, they're sort of there. So now they're taking notice of. People have started thinking, well, you know, how should we deal with this? Shall we deny it? Shall we try and reduce the death rates? Or could we code slightly differently that might get different results? And it is that we call creative coding. Now, what we have done there is we know the things that can be done. Now, the typical things that can be done are to put more patients into palliative care. There are two different ways of adjusting for palliative care. One is palliative care has a code. All this stuff comes with a sort of name. And palliative care ought to be, I mean, to go all the way back, Canada actually has a large number of palliative care cases, rather more than the average, because many of their, so we learn from them. It should only be coded as palliative care if the patient is A, with a terminal illness, and B, receiving palliative care treatment. Being on a palliative care ward is not sufficient. So we need to make quite sure that the coding is done correctly. But what we also look at is whether there has suddenly been a change of palliative care coding at a certain point, the last year usually. And the hospitals have got high death rates usually. And